Welcome to another episode of Crazy Canuck Truckin. Thank you very much for following along and for liking and sharing and all the reviews. It's been awesome. It's really good. Keep getting the word out there. So remember, if you have any questions or comments, please direct them to crazycanucktruckin@gmail.com. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. So it's crazycanucktruckin, no G on the end, at gmail.com. So this is the reminder I want to go with today, that we are all people. It's people that's the most important thing when we're in business, when we're dealing with people outside of work. Everywhere, everything we do, it's the people, it's the connections we have that are most important. And if we need to watch and be careful that we're not squashing people or hurting people, these are tough times. Interest rates are going up. There's a lot of things going on. There's people doing all kinds of crazy things these days. But try to have some empathy for each other and remind each other and stir each other up to do good things rather than tear things down. That is the message for today. Let's work together, do as much as we can to help each other out. And we'll get right into this interview. It's going to be in two parts. So this is the first part coming up with a good friend of mine from I met back in 2014 on the ice roads. And you'll hear his name coming up soon. He's a great guy. And he has been an example to me in being a good human being and being a good person when we're up on the ice. I mean, that's a pressure cooker up there. And he's always been a good example to other people around there on how to conduct yourself and how to work hard and still treat people well. So let's get right into it. I believe you'll enjoy this, and we'll just have a chat about being on the ice roads. It'll be a good time. So listen in here. I want to welcome my good friend, somebody I've known for quite some time and have a lot of respect for him. He's a great guy. He's got some interesting stories to tell. Let's welcome Ben Avern to the show. Thank you for agreeing to come on the show, Ben.
My pleasure, David. Thank you for asking.
I wanted to have you on for a while, and I've been a little slow getting you here, so but it's been good. So let's go back. Little Ben Avern grew up where?
I grew up in England, in the southeast of England.
Southeast of England, and now today, tell our listeners where you are.
I'm live from Yellowknife, or not live for you when this goes on air. But I'm in Yellowknife, yes.
Yellowknife. That's just a little bit cooler than where you grew up?
A little bit, yeah, tad. It's such a great place. It's the best place I've ever lived, and I've lived in some desirable places, but this beats them all.
That was something that I remember from near the beginning meeting you. Just a little background for the listeners. We met driving on the ice roads out of Yellowknife back in 2014. And at that time, you weren't living in Yellowknife, but you had been living in Yellowknife at a time previous to that. And you had said then that you loved your time in Yellowknife, and you were living on Vancouver Island, I believe, when we first met. And I was like, why would you leave Vancouver Island to come to Yellowknife?
Well, I mean, different people are looking for different things, but I like the wilderness. I like the remoteness. I like the climate. I like the people, job opportunities. And not to say that I didn't like the people, for instance, on the island. Most of my friends are there, actually. But Yellowknife works for me. It has the right vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't understand it at the time, but I fell in love with the place. Like I went up to make some money, and I came up a couple more times because I like being there. It's actually a place that really grew on me.
And I think a lot of people find out very quickly when they get here whether they like it or not. I've met more than one person who came up for 2 weeks to visit a friend or a family member, and that was 20, 25 years ago. They never left. And there's other people that will be here for 2 weeks and say, never again. That's too freaking cold for me.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I found interesting was that it's one place you don't need a lot of speed enforcement because it's really hard to drive fast on those roads, unless they fixed them up since I've been there last.
No, they haven't. Well, they do, but they keep getting back to the same state because of the permafrost.
Yeah,
So there's speed enforcement here, but yeah, it's hardly a big problem.
yeah. The speed limit signs are just a suggestion. You don't really want to go that fast, and
No,
very few people do. At least when I drove there, anyway. So people always love to hear about the ice roads, and so I'd be. Why don't we delve into that a little bit? You drove the ice roads for many years, a lot more years than I did. Uh, what's the first thing that comes to mind when people ask you about the ice roads?
well, um, I like I like the adventure part of it. That was what first drew me to it. When I was a teenager back in England, I read about them in trucking magazines in the UK, and thought that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And never thought that I don't know how many years later, 20 years later or something, I'd be up here doing it myself. But that was the draw. Excuse me. Um, and once I started before the TV show, and it was a very different job back then. The people, the, the people and fun we had was just phenomenal. It was a bit of a sort of um, unpoliced Wild West, but everyone was respectful and smart and sensible. And I mean, everything was turned on its head when the TV show aired. It's getting better again now, I think. But the people from my very first season in 2005, I'm still in touch with people from back then. Um, One of them I visit socially. I know his kids and both of his wives, not at the same time. I should point out. So it's great. There's people I've been friends with for however long that is, coming up 20 years, just from driving the ice roads, which is astonishing because you don't get to spend that much time with any one person. And when you do, it's still over the radio. So it's pretty cool. And people like yourself and other people other friends we have in common are just wonderful, wonderful people. And we maybe all here for the same reasons and just having a really good time, getting the same enjoyment out of the job.
Yeah, yeah. It lasting friendships.
Yeah,
You're in a you're you have to watch each other's backs, and it's quite. It kind of melts you together, right?
it does. It does. And I think, if somebody helps you out of a bind, you realize how much you appreciate it and how much it would be appreciated if you get the chance to help someone else out of a bind, because a bind up on the ice road can be a real bind. It can potentially be a life threatening bind.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. You're not playing with you're playing with dangerous weather.
Yeah.
Compared to you break down up there, you can freeze to death pretty quickly.
And people don't realize that despite however cold it might be in Yellowknife, you go north at the tree line and there's nothing to break the wind. And it's hard to describe how cold that wind can be. Some nights I remember offloading at the mines, it's painful, literally painful. I always got a headache, it would hit me right here. And then I jump back in the truck and I feel nauseous. And if it's affecting your brain that much that you feel nauseous, then it's bloody cold.
Yeah, yeah. I remember one of our buddies. He had some pretty severe hypothermia when he got up to one of the mines because his heat had quit working. And I can't remember how much weight he lost, but it was something like 15 pounds, like just like that,
I did.
because
Oh, sorry, carry on.
yeah, and he wasn't a big guy to start with.
Yeah, I did a trip to a caddy in my second season, and I lost my heat somewhere between the Meadows and Lockhart. So a caddy is what, a 40-hour round trip, and I did 32 or something of them with no heat, and I wasn't very happy, I've got to say. I had every stitch of clothing on. By the time I remember getting to Lockhart on the way back again, and I was so tired. All I wanted to do was sleep, but it was too cold to sleep. I couldn't. So I lay in my bunk for a while. I remember actually literally crying out of frustration because what do? I can't just stay here forever. And I eventually made it home and I got back to Yellowknife, and I think it was, I don't know if it was 7 or 8 at night, and I parked the truck outside my boss's shop. I didn't even tell him I was home. I just parked it, left it running, and jumped in my car and went home and never said a word till I got a message the next day. Hey, your truck's fixed. It's, yeah, it's horrible. And the other thing people might not realize is that you have to crack a window because otherwise they fog up the ice up on the inside, and you can't see where you're going because you've got no heat, no blower on your windshield, and yeah, it's different.
How did the how did I would get back to your earlier comment about how the TV show changed things? How was that? Why did that happen?
Well, I used to say my first 2 seasons, this is before the show, were 90% fun, 10% work. And when I took, I think it was 2 years off because I was at school, came back when the show had aired for one season, I believe, by then. The one that was filmed in Yellowknife. And it was complete opposite. It was 10% fun, 90% work. The rules were, there were rules for everything, and they were so stringently enforced, and our orientation was, it was actually, it was kind of childish, some of the questions. It really hit the JV because, I mean, I can understand why to a point. They were made out, it was made out that any of us could die at any time for any reason. It was completely unsafe, and that is definitely not the truth. That is absolutely not the truth. If it's not safe, they don't let us out there. But obviously, they have to hype it up for the TV show, and that was a shame because they could have portrayed it accurately, and it still would have been a very entertaining show, probably just as entertaining and a whole lot more real. Um, so everyone was being watched, scrutinized, penalized, punished, ticketed for the slightest little thing, and it was that all the fun was gone. It was a job then. And as I say now, I haven't driven for I think 2 seasons, but the last time I did, things were getting better a bit. There's still great people up there. The rules are maybe a little bit more, just a little bit more sensible.
Yeah, they were highlighting all of the stuff that is crazy up there, and really scared the people in power. Like, what are you guys doing? And it was just some people being idiots, and it wrecked it for everybody coming after.
It did, and in a lot of ways too, because another thing is everybody and his dog wanted to be an ice road truck, so the rates went down because no problem finding drivers.
Yeah,
And as you probably know, um, there were seasons, February, March, when there was barely a truck driver out of work in Western Canada because they're all up here.
yeah, yeah. It was tough. For years, it was tough to get involved up there because it was pretty closed, and it was, everybody knew when they're up there, then it was a special job, and everybody took care of it. And then after the so many veterans left after the TV show because it was getting so ridiculous, and they were kicking people out, you know, and they still do that. kick people out for just about anything. If they don't like you, then better tread carefully.
True, but if they do like you can get away with a lot. It's a lot of favoritism and
Yeah, but it's a for me it was always a lot of it was hard work, and some days like it's like why am I here? Why you know? And then you get back and have a bit of food to eat and a little bit of sleep, and it's like let's do it again. Totally forgetting how bad the trip was.
and it's amazing how much the lack of sleep can affect. I found my mood, especially when I bought my own truck, and you'd be you'd be refreshed, and something major would go wrong with the truck that's going to cost thousands of dollars to repair, and you just go, well, that's what happens. That's the way it is. That's why I get paid a lot of money. I'll go get it fixed and keep going. And then the next trip, you'd be overtired, and a headlight would burn out, and you'd go, "That's it. I'm starting the bloody thing." It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a we had a rough start to just before the 2016 season. Um, just a couple weeks beforehand, I was coming up to drive your truck actually, and because you were busy doing other stuff, and we got news about one of our friends.
Yeah.
When I think of him, I think of you because, and vice versa, because when I first met you guys, you always seemed to be close by, and then when we had the wrap up dinner, then we were together with just there's 8 of us, six, 8 of us, something like that, and just before 2016. You want to talk about that?
So Dale, I met Dale. I think it was my first. It would have been actually my first season with my own truck. So I only actually knew him for one season, one maybe two. Time flies. It might have been two, but I've been doing the pre-haul out of Edmonton up to here, and my last trip up this way before the ice road started was sent up with this guy who we were hanging out in the driver's lounge in at Continental, yapping about people, and we had friends in common. Charlie was the bond, I think, the initial bond. Um, and so anyway, Dale and I ended up running up to Yellowknife together. We had fun because we had to find the yard where our loads were, and we were trying to get Siri and whoever else to help, and then his load was messed up, and we eventually made it up here. Um, but Dale was just a really genuine guy. There was no ego, there was no pretense. He was down to earth. He was adult. He was honest. He was just a nice guy, and he would be the first to help you out of a bind if you needed it, or offer you an encouraging word of support. And whenever I think of Dale, I think of the fun we had together, a shared joke, or I call it a hardship, but even that might be pushing it a bit. But something that went wrong on a trip, and we helped each other out of a bind, and then that season ended, and I went back to Vancouver Island. I was working on a farm, and I remember we were harvesting silage, and I remember thinking I should text her one of these days. And that afternoon, my phone went. It said, "Hey Ben, yeah, here we go. This is the friendship song. It's really cool because it's one thing, and quite possible to make a friend and a real friend for the duration of the ice, but then never stay in touch after that. Become friends again the next year, but only the special friends that you stay in touch with once the season's over. Stay in touch with you around. Dale was absolutely one of them.
Yeah, and he I've had his wife on the show, Angel, and she's one of the few people that's named Angel who really is an angel. She's a very sweet lady, and she and Dale loved each other, and that was really cool to see. Even up on the ice, he was not ever talking bad about her or anything. It was really cool.
That's very true. That's a good point because a lot of guys will badmouth their wives, whether it's just a macho thing or whether they mean it. It doesn't matter. But Dale never said a bad word about Angel. He clearly loved her and he admitted it, and it stood out because he was the only one I ever heard do that.
Yeah, yeah,
Or maybe
that.
my wife's listening, in which case you did too.
I was probably talking about my grandkids.
Yeah, yeah, you did. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that's actually what stood out to me too was how he talked about his wife. And there's some people that I hung around with on the ice roads a little bit that when they started talking like that, I was just like, I don't really want to be with you.
Mhm.
You know. Remember one guy said, "Yeah, I'm glad to get away from home. I got a 2 month old at home and keeping me up all night and wow wow wow." I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I would that pissed me off. That pissed me off bad.
It's it's interesting. I found it interesting seeing the difference. I call them different levels of truck driving. So there's guys like myself who only ever did it for a few months of the year or it's for a couple of years at a time outside the ice, but never really a career truck. And then there were guys that were. So I remember being at Divik Dispatch one day or one night, and there was a guy who was saying that his wife had moved since he'd been up on the ice, and he hadn't seen the new house yet. And that sort of thing just blew me away. Um, it's yeah, but I guess that's just the opposite of Dale and Angel who were tight, and yeah, it was really sad. And his picture is still up in Dispatch. You'll be glad to know I went to see Kevin a few weeks ago, and the 4 or 5 guys that we lost, their pictures are still up there in the foyer. So.
Yeah, we've lost a few. We've lost some notable people, and
Yeah.
it's been it's interesting. Yeah, it's just for a short period of time of our lives, but each one of them has made some pretty big impacts on us.
Something about that job, you tend to really form a connection uh, of any different kind with the guys that we with very intensely for 6 or 8 weeks, maybe 10 weeks of the year.
Yeah, I remember walking into Joint Ventures JV dispatch and seeing Bruce Edwards sitting there, and he was sitting waiting for the next convoy because he was a rookie. And I ended up leading his convoy, and I'm like, really? Like, you've probably forgotten more than I will ever know. He's from the Yukon, and they wouldn't let him go up the ice because there is one rookie too many for that first convoy. And so they held him over to the next convoy, which was mine, and he was jumping in with us, and I'm like, man.
But Bruce would also take that in his stride. I actually saw him a week ago. I was driving past the pumps and I recognized his truck, so I stopped in to say hi, and I hope we'll grab a coffee before he leaves town.
Yeah. Nah, he's a good guy. It's one of the guys I stay in touch with. Not real regular, but a few times throughout the year. Then we're texting, and when I was, if I would be in BC, I'd be texting him and seeing where he's at. We met up on the road a couple of times,
Okay. Yeah.
and so he's yeah he is such a good example to many drivers. Like I could get pretty wound up about something, and he's like, "Relax, Dave. It's all gonna be okay. Just
Yeah.
remember who you are. You're a truck driver."
Yes. Yeah, don't let you forget that.
No, he's a good guy. Good guy. Really good guy. So yeah, it was just kind of funny that a guy from the Yukon that was around almost when they invented trucking.
Yeah.
Was you know, um, waiting for a convoy being led by a much younger guy.
Yeah, because he didn't have the experience.
Because he did. Oh man. But that's yeah, and many others we run across. It was an interesting. I always found it an interesting study in people, and I don't remember who told it to me. Maybe it was Dozer. Can't remember his real name, but Dozer
Okay.
told me.
I know you
Um,
mean.
he was a Continental driver, and he says you just need to last 2 weeks. And I'm like, what? Why? He says everybody's all gung ho for 2 weeks, and you go out there, and there's not there. Their hours rules are quite different, so you just get out there and you just start running like crazy. Is by 2 weeks they do something stupid, they get kicked off the ice, or they get so tired they can't drive anymore. And he says you just pace yourself and just do what you can do, and stick to your own rule, stick to your own pattern, and after you get past 2 weeks, so you'll be good until about 6 weeks in. Then you'll be looking forward to the last 2 weeks, and then the last day you're like, ah, whoo.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's very true. Finding your own rhythm is really key. It's if you get into that rhythm, you can string it out and make it last for a few weeks. And then you're going to get a chance to catch up when there's a breakdown or the road shut down because of a storm or something. You're going to catch up.
yeah, yeah. It was very interesting. People would be like really gung ho, and they do a week, and then they just be, this is more than they expected.
Yeah,
And then other guys that are quiet, and they just go out there and get the job done, and just steady and consistently putting in lots of trips. So thank you for listening to this first episode of my interview with Ben Avern, real Ice Road trucker. So uh, remember, like and share. Send me questions, comments at crazycanucktruckin@gmail.com. You can get there through the website or directly, whichever way you want. Crazycanucktruckin.com is the website. Crazycanucktruckin@gmail.com is the email. Send me questions, comments. Have a great week, and we'll catch up with you the next episode with Ben Avern. Thank you.